Welcome to the Finance Forum. I'm Abdu-Raof Hanslo. Today, my very special guest in studio is Mr. Etienne Wilsnach of Alchemy Financial Services. Over the last few weeks, we've been speaking financial planning, insurance, and various topics that's pertinent to you, the community. Today, however, we look at something a little bit different, something that's important to most of us, and that is entrepreneurship. We all have those thoughts of becoming our own boss and having our own businesses. Today we're going to be looking in depth at the pitfalls thereof and the benefits thereof. Good day to you, Etienne.
Hi, Abdu-Raof. How are you?
It's always a pleasure having you in studio, as long as I'm on this side and you are on that side. That's fine. Etienne, firstly, entrepreneurs.
Yes.
There's this major move in South Africa, and we see it every single month and every single day and every single week in the news, that more and more people are moving towards starting their own little, how should we put it, their little task or little empire or little business of their own, to become their own bosses. Why is that?
I think it's an economic drive. It's often not choice. So there are some of us that choose to become self-employed, but often you have people faced with just general unemployment. They not been able to find employment or formal employment for a lengthy time, and then it evolves to the point where, hang on, if I need to eat, I need to have some form of economy, and then they become self-employed. Others, it's just ambition.
Yeah, now, you know, the last few weeks we've been speaking about many topics, and all surrounding financial planning, financial advice, insurance, investments, and various different other things. Today specifically, we're looking at this specific topic, and this was a topic that you suggested we cover. Any reasoning behind that?
Yeah, thank you. If anything, I need to thank you for allowing me to have a chat. So I personally, township kid, and I've grown, I've gone through the corporate space, formal sector. I've been self-employed for a long time. In that, there's a lot of learning. I call it my MBA. You know, it's informal, but you learn, the University of Life itself. The problem is there's not a lot of conversation around that. So we get people that come into the entrepreneurial space wanting to be self-employed, but nobody's holding their hand. There's not a strong mentorship. So some of them could have succeeded, but nobody was there to guide and assist and to just warn them about the potential pitfalls. Yeah. Your program gives us a perfect opportunity just to say to guys, look, have faith, believe, but watch out for the following.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can reach those.
No, I'm sure we can. You know, Etienne, when I think of entrepreneurs, the first thing that springs to mind is a person that's tired of working someone else wealthy, or working for someone and earning a pittance, but yet the owner of the business earning all the benefits thereof. That's my idea of an entrepreneur, a guy that became tired of corporate industry or so. But in today's context, in today's context in South Africa, that's changed. We've obviously seen the rise in unemployment. We've seen, especially in today's economic downturn, in the economic downturn of South Africa, we've seen people put under tremendous pressure as far as expenses are concerned. So in South Africa's context, what's the main reason, and what's the reason for the conversation around entrepreneurs or SMMEs in that?
So if you look at stats, raw statistics, not just for South Africa but for Africa, the future of our economy, our growth, our employment opportunity is not in the formal sector. So let's not talk about government, because I don't even think in government and semi-government city council there's going to be a lot of formal employment taking place. But yet we've got 10,000 matriculants going through the system every year. Where are those kids going to find employment? And I think statistics at the moment say that 40% of them are going to be forced to be self-employed anyway. And, you know, I think one of my biggest challenges, and this is why I'm talking to you today, is when we go to these big auditoriums and, you know, the entrepreneurs of Facebook and these big multi-millionaires, they're not talking to the community. An entrepreneur is that gentleman that started with one packet of potatoes and he's divided it up into 20 small packets and he sold those, and he realized, hang on, within 2 weeks I could have bought 2 pockets, and before you know it, he's got a bakkie and he's going down the street every day providing the community with fresh fruit and veg, and he's feeding his kids, he's paying his bond, and before you know it, he's got 2 or 3 bakkies. That is still an entrepreneur. That's the future of our economy. That's where our kids are going to find potential employment in the next 10 years.
Now Etienne, that type of scenario, it's an entrepreneur that's born out of necessity.
Yeah.
We've about 2 weeks back, I read a very nice article in one of our local newspapers, and this is about a university student, a BCom student at one of the major universities in South Africa, and his story started in 1998. And in 1998, he was from an underprivileged background and could not afford the textbooks at the university. And he kept borrowing textbooks and so on and so on. And a few years into his study, he realized, wait, there's a gap here. Mm-hmm. And he started a business where he would pay people for their used textbooks at the end of every year and resell it.
Yes.
Today, it's a multi-million rand industry. He has a shop at 6 of the major universities across South Africa, and he sells used textbooks.
I've bought books from him when I studied.
You've bought books.
Yes.
So I think that in its context is a perfect example of seeing opportunity.
Yeah.
So the way I look at this, the story of entrepreneurs, the way you speak at the moment, and of the information that you're imparting, is that there's 2 different types of entrepreneurs. There's obviously the entrepreneur born out of necessity, and the entrepreneur born out of opportunity.
Exactly.
So in this exact context, when we look at the self-employed people of South Africa today, where does that fit in? Is it a necessity, more on the necessity line, or is it more born out of opportunity currently in South Africa?
I personally think it's both. So when I made the call, because I was formerly employed in city council for many years, I met an American gentleman in the early 90s, that said to me, I asked him why is he living in America, and in South Africa, not America, and he said, Etienne, in America, 90% of the people are trying to make 10% of the money, okay, and in South Africa, it's the other way around. He said the opportunity is in Africa. And that inspired me in 1994 to make the transition to become self-employed, where I've spent the last 24 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's any inspiration, so you take a youngster that at the time didn't even matriculate. I had a JC, a junior certificate from Manenberg, and over the years, I could safely say that probably earn more than many doctors in South Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what the opportunities allowed. Or it's available to us in this country, but there are certain things that we are not doing. The other reality, however, is that where are kids going to find formal employment?
Now, coming to that as well, Etienne, there's obviously a pitfall as well. And when one looks at the self-employed individual today, we so often see that so many of their small businesses start up with good intentions, with huge dreams, only to find them fail after a year or 2 whilst in business.
Yeah.
What's the reason for it, and what should we be looking out for in order to avoid that type of scenario?
I can talk about this for 3 hours. So this is actually why we're having this segment. So there's 2 things. Firstly, you've got to be quite truthful with yourself in terms of your own character. If you are the type of person that needs guidance and instruction, and you're not necessarily an entrepreneur by nature, caution. Don't step into it for the romantic reasons. Being an entrepreneur is tough. There are different challenges. You don't have the status of a title. You don't have the support of your big organization. So you need to make many choices that is often quite lonely and deemed high risk. That's not your character. Then being formally employed is not a bad thing. It's often deemed as far easier. So firstly, define your character. Know what your personality. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't want to be formally employed. I don't want to work for, I don't want the titles, and I'm okay with it. I love being an entrepreneur because I change lives.
Yeah.
The second thing is this romantic idea. When people, they've got this idea, I'm a plumber and I don't want to work for a boss, I want to own my own plumbing business. The first thing he does, he buys the BMW. Okay, it's like he got a contract from somebody to service a building, and man, before he fitted his first pipe or his first tap, he's bought the BMW.
Yeah.
Because the spend in the subconscious mind starts because there's an association with the success that I'm going to achieve. So it's instant gratification. I haven't got my first invoice yet, but I've bought the car. So what happens? And then you move, from below the railway line to above the railway line because I have the contract, and they kind of make the sums about the potential income in advance, but then they implement the debt before they started making the money. That has been, in my opinion, the biggest setback, the biggest reason for failure. Because what happens is that you immediately start your business on minus 30,000 Rand a month. And then if you have one bad month, for example, you ill and you couldn't ply your trade for 2 weeks, so you cannot invoice, and that 30,000 becomes 60. And that has been the biggest. If I can reach out to any young entrepreneur, apply the concept of delayed gratification. So remain the same, keep your debt levels at an ultimate low, and start making money first.
I think you make a good point there, Etienne. When one's employed by an employer, you have one thing to look forward to, and that's a set salary at the end of every single month. But certainly if you're working towards an income every single month, fighting and biting the bullet, then it takes discipline through your action in order to be gratified at the end of the month. And I think more or less that's what you're trying to say.
So be conservative in your approach. Avoid debt at all costs. When your business is starting, when you've got a nice nest egg of a 6 month salary that you could put aside, and you've got those basic disciplines, go and buy, reward yourself. The problem is that we often reward yourself off the idea of how much I'm going to make.
Yeah.
And that has been the biggest downfall of most SMMEs. Okay. The other thing is, so you've got a good plumber or a good yoga teacher or a good panel beater that decides, I don't want to work for Etienne any longer. I want to start my own because I'm a good panel beater. The problem often is that they don't have the business skill and the acumen to actually open a business. And they think because I'm a good panel beater, I can run a good panel shop.
Yeah.
Please caution. I've seen many good yoga teachers fail at owning a yoga studio because they couldn't run a business. They were good teachers, but they weren't good business owners. So that's that first comment about know your personality. Now, that's not a major setback. Even if you don't have that skill, you can acquire it. You can outsource it. So don't let that be a barrier to entry. Don't say, I'm not going to now start my panel shop because I don't know business. But understand that that's not your strength. Manage it then. Focus on your strength, but manage your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's been a big downfall historically for young SMMEs, young business people.
Yeah. Now, Etienne, obviously you spoke about a lot now. You mentioned the various different industries, and obviously when choosing an industry to enter, you're a specialist in that specific industry. Nothing else, unfortunately. And so many times we've seen, for example, and I don't mean to trample on doctors, but so many times we've seen doctors, when it comes to their finances, they believe they know, but unfortunately they're on the back foot.
They're my worst clients.
Well, I'm using them as an example because that
they know nothing about
industry.
money.
Yeah. So I think, which leads me to my next question, is where does academics fit in when looking at entrepreneurship?
Okay, so you need to obviously benchmark it. So if my professional or my intent is to own my own accounting practice, obviously you need to be an accountant. That being said, though, that even if I'm a in an industry that doesn't require major academic backing. So if I'm going to be a fruit and vegetable vendor or a panel beater, I obviously don't need to go and do a degree. I mean, it's just logic. What I am saying is that there's always certain learnings that you could expose yourself to. So if it's basic accounting, if it is basic business skills, to go to a business school and say, let me do a course on entrepreneurship, I don't think it can ever do you any harm. I think one of the problems, and I see it even in my industry, and that's why we're implementing forced academia, is that, people want to make money, but they want to do it off raw skill. And I can shoot from the hip. In my opinion, there's always place for some form of formal learning. Even if it just familiarizes. If I'm a panel beater, am I becoming acquainted with new technology, new types of paint, new methods of doing it, unrelated to the actual production of the item? Am I learning about running a business? My management skill, HR function? Man, do not underestimate the need for that. So it doesn't have to, when I say academia, you don't have to go and get a degree, even if you just do basic stuff, but do not remain naive to the requirement of learning.
Now, Etienne, before the program, we had a brief discussion, and you mentioned a funny little term, and that's bobby shop. And I think so many times in our community, as much as the term might be not so appropriate, but in most circumstances, that is so appropriate to our community when running our businesses. What do you mean by the term bobby shop?
So please, I didn't want to offend doctors earlier. No bobbies. I think I use it because that's how we grew up. And it's an historic fact that due to the apartheid history, certain segments of our community were entrepreneurs 50 years ago, but they had limitations. They could only run their business in a certain way, which is usually cash in the drawer. And what I've seen is that we've not evolved from that behavior. And specifically in our community, I see it in my industry as well. We have the opportunity to excel beyond what we could dream of. We can make as much money and we can change as many lives as we want. But with that, there has to be certain basic changes in conduct, in the way we see the world, in the way we conduct. So you cannot go into a westernized economy, but you're behaving in a third world way. And that's what I'm referring to. So it's not referring to bubbies, it's purely just a little term that I've developed. But if I'm selling bicycles and I want to compete with Specialized or with Rocky Mountain from Canada or with Santa Cruz, I cannot expect the person's going to spend 80,000 Rand on my bicycle when I'm got a little bobby shop in a corner that's got bicycle in boxes and it's not assembled, and I think it's okay. And it's a personal view. Some people probably believe they can do it. I think, though, that we need to adjust our conduct, our behavior. So if you come to my practice, you'll see there are certain beliefs and behaviors that is historic from how we grew up that I do not tolerate in my space. Because I think if I want to take my business to a first-class business, to an international standard business, there are certain behaviors I need to change. And I think that's critical, and I see that often in our community. The potential for that business to flourish is incredible. The behavior, however, remains third world. And that's so if you can make that switch, so hang on, I need to adjust and adopt some Western ways of seeing and conducting my business, professionalizing my business, I could actually take it to the next level.
It reminds me of a little story that I learned when I entered the investment finance industry. And we were doing research on a few companies in South Africa, and most of these companies had 5-year and 10-year plans of where they would be. And that same year, we switched over to international funds, and we started researching international funds. And the one company we came up with, and this is an international company, so I'm sure it's fine to mention it, it's Sony, and the Japanese technology maker. And we were shocked to realize that Sony plans 50 to 100 years ahead.
Wow.
And I think the same point you make there is, in order for any business to thrive or to grow, one has to plan ahead. And that planning, unfortunately, is not the Bobby shop mentality that is required.
I think one of the biggest exposures in that space, for example, is formalizing your accounting process and your tax process. So mine, I have a dedicated accountant. I'm in financial service. I could do it myself.
Yeah.
I don't. I have Kevin Chapman and Associates, and I pay him a monthly fee. He ensures that my VAT's sorted, my tax are up to date, that if I need financials at any stage in the year, I can actually just drop him a mail and say, send me signed up-to-date financials. Okay? Why? Because I need to be structured. I need to be deemed professional. I need to align myself with what my franchisor requires from me as a formal franchise.
Yeah.
And that I've seen many good businesses after 4 or 5 years receiving a tax invoice from SARS saying, Mr. Peterson, you owe us 240,000 Rand for unpaid VAT.
Yeah.
And that's the end of that business.
Yeah.
And it's those little elements that I'm saying, learn about it and see what it is that your industry needs and put it in place.
Now, Etienne, the one thing, coming back to financial planning, and that's always something that we'll do on the Finance Forum, when looking at insurance and insurance products, how does the insurance companies and financial planners as yourself and the insurance companies itself speak to entrepreneurs concerning short-term insurance, personal insurance, and various different covers for new business people entering the space?
I often see there's no conversation. And I think that's a bigger threat. So often people don't know that there's a segment in our industry called business insurance, where I could actually talk about aspects like business assurance, buy and sell agreements. If there are two partners in a business, say, hang on, if one of the other partners passes on and you don't want his wife to be your new partner, is there a possibility of putting an arrangement in place where I now become the sole owner, but I've created funding to purchase his wife's shares?
Yeah.
We don't know about these. There's something called key man assurance that says Abdu-Raof is a key individual in my business, and if I lose him through death or disability, my business could suffer. And in that period where I need to re-employ somebody, how am I going to financially be protected? Have the conversation around key man insurance. But how many times have we seen businesses where the guy has a bakkie, he's a plumber, and he didn't insure the bakkie? And he has an accident that leaves the bakkie disabled for 2 weeks. The problem is he cannot work for 2 weeks. And he didn't consider, hang on, maybe if I spoke to my broker and I had a short-term product that put a replacement bakkie in place while they're fixing it, hang on, I can protect my business. More, however, though, how many of our community members are dependent on the income generated from that SMME or that place of work? And then they did not ask the question, but if my husband, who is the panel beater and the owner, if he passes away, it's not just the fact that I cannot pay the bond, but that income that he generated is gone.
Yeah.
And I've had the conversation with my financial planner saying, Etienne, if I die, who's going to ensure that my family are okay? Because I print the money. I'm the guy that actually physically do the work, and the money that's generated comes from my labor. So I'm not protecting the money maker. And I see often in our community immense poverty because we do not look at those. So look at you as an individual. Are you a key person? Is there a partnership agreement? And then do I need to protect my assets, my vehicles, my grinder? If they steal my grinder and I cannot afford to, can I insure it? And have that conversation with your broker. It's critical.
Now, Etienne, in closing, what's your advice to any new entrepreneur or a person who has aspirations to become an entrepreneur going forward? What advice do you have for them? Be
real, firstly. Do not do it for romantic reasons. Do not think, oh, my friend, he was a building contractor and I can do the same. Don't go into something that is completely foreign to you, firstly. But I think what I'd like to share, because I followed the dream, don't lose the dream. If you genuinely think that this is what you can do and you can contribute both to the economy and establish an amazing quality of life, but be happy, don't not do it. I think there's massive opportunity in South Africa. I don't want to live anywhere else.
You've been watching the Finance Forum with myself, Abdu-Raof Hanslo, and we've been speaking the prospects of entrepreneurship and financial planning. I hope we haven't scared you on starting your own business, and I hope that we've highlighted we've managed to at least highlight some of the pitfalls involved when starting your own small to medium enterprise. In future, if you do have any questions, speak to your financial advisor, and until next time, stay focused to your finances.